Jake. So welcome everybody. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people here, 6 students kind of with us, but only 2 are joined from the outside at the moment. Although Jake said he joined, didn't he? How many people are here, Jason? Can't hear you.
14.
Well, I can't see 14 pictures. What's happened?
On your top right of the screen, you can see a little toggle, like if you move your cursor towards it, that says view. And there's different views there, which might help you see more.
Oh, you have to press. Yeah, we can only see 6 at a time.
That's because you're sharing the screen.
Ah.
But it's just easy to forget because it's your actual face.
Well, hi everybody. I thought there was only a few people here, but there's 16 or something, so that's great. So we had a great talk last Saturday. People said it was really good to have a bit more time so you could debate and split off and talk about things. Yeah, so that's what you've got to do all the time, really, isn't it? But of course, you've got to find time to do that. And anyway, it went all right, I thought. Good attendance, in spite of competition from Geshe Namdak. Those people who are, you know, taking his teachings, the Jamyang followers. Yeah, so that's that. So we raised a couple of debates, but it's difficult to get rid of one's false appearances, isn't it? Get to the truth. So we better look at those debates. We only really introduced them rather than should be on migration now. I should have gone back to Africa. So if we get those debates up wherever they've gone, you know, it's still saying 29th of September, I think, the debate debates from the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics book. So I think we want page. Yeah, page 43. It says page 43, no gap. That's the number of the debate. It's on page 5 of the document. Should we start with that one? But we should maybe just revise the definitions. Just of the 3. What do we call this? The 3. What are we looking for? Three modes, yeah, 3 modes. 3 modes. So what's the definition of correct sign then, Christoph? Correct sign definition.
The definition of a correct sign
Please.
Is that which is the 3 modes.
So that which is the 3 modes, it follows that's the definition of correct sign.
I accept.
Follows is not, because you cannot posit the definition of correct sign in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product.
The result is not established.
Posit.
The definition of a correct sign in the proof of sound as being impermanent by the sign product is that which is set as a sign. No, sorry. That which is the 3 modes in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product. So
that which is the 3 modes in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, is that the definition of correct sign in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product? Follows it is not, because we need somebody to posit the definition of property of the subject in the proof of sound is impermanent. Can you do that, Marco?
No.
It's in the book. Paul, perhaps.
By the person for whom it has become by the person for whom it has become the property of the subject in the proof of sounds is impermanent, it is ascertained as inexistent in the mode of statement
In accordance with the mode of statement
in accordance with the mode of statement on the basis of sound.
on sound. Yeah, by the person for whom it has become the property of the subject, the proof of sound is impermanent, it is ascertained as only existent in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. Follows that is the definition of the property of the subject in the proof of sound is impermanent.
So
Yeah. So we're going to need these, or one or two of these. So what's the next one? The second one is forward pervasion. Can you posit the definition? Forward pervasion. Jan? Form pervasion in the proof of sound is impermanent.
By the person for whom it's become the second mode of the sign in the proof of sound is impermanent, it's ascertained as existent solely in the similar class in the proof of sound is impermanent.
Yeah, solely in the similar class. Yep, and then the other one, the counter pervasion in the proof of sound is impermanent. Can anybody posit that? Jason. Definition of
Counter pervasion.
pervasion. The counter pervasion. Yeah, definition of the counter pervasion.
In the proof of sound is impermanent.
Yeah.
Counter pervasion. If it's not impermanent, it's necessarily not a product.
Definition.
Oh, the definition. Counter pervasion.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a definition. I just know what it kind of is.
Sweated blood to translate this book. Sweated blood. Hannele. Posit the definition of the counter pervasion in the proof of sounds impermanent. Tell us what page it's on in the book. Hannele. Can you do that?
Oh, sorry. It's on page 15.
Page 15.
Yeah.
You know there is a book, do you, Jason? He printed them. He took them all to the
Yeah.
printer.
I've got the book, but I have it on PDF, and I just think I haven't got enough time.
About 200 copies in his home. If you want a copy, you just write to Jason. Yes, Hannele, the definition of
By the person for whom it has become the third mode of the sign in the proof of sound is impermanent, it is ascertained as only non-existent in the dissimilar class in the proof of sound is impermanent.
thank you. By the person for whom it has become the third mode of the sign in the proof of sound is impermanent, it is ascertained as only non-existent in the dissimilar class in the proof of sound is impermanent. Follows that's the definition of counter pervasion in the proof of sound is impermanent. Okay, Hannele. Accept. Maybe you're taking switch your microphone off.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, never mind. Okay, so those are the three modes. And then in the first debate, we've got this one about definiendum and its definition. So it follows that it is not, Tom, because you cannot posit the definition of definiendum.
The triply qualified imputed existent.
So the subject triply qualified imputed existent, it follows that's the definition of definiendum.
Except.
So it follows subject triply qualified imputed existent. It follows it's a definiendum
Why?
because there's a definition of definiendum.
No provision.
So if it's a definition of definiendum, it doesn't have to be a definiendum.
Except.
So if it's the definition of fire, it doesn't have to be fire
Why?
because the reasoning is so similar.
There's no provision.
You've had guessing number helping you, haven't you? Yeah, so it follows did it not, because you cannot posit the three qualifications. Yeah, you say the triply qualified imputed existent. So what are the three qualifications that make something a triply qualified imputed existent? Tom.
So I can't remember.
Ah, okay. Then Francois, do you know those?
Right, so in general, it's a definiendum, or it is renowned as a definiendum. It is established by its illustration, and it's the definiendum of no other definition. Something like
Yeah, that's more or less right. I mean, in Perbichok, you can look it up in the middling topics. So it's in the presentation of our own system in the chapter on definition definiendum. In Perbichok's middling collected topics, page maybe I didn't write the page down. Yeah, so in general, it's a definiendum. It's established on its illustrations, and it's not the definiendum of any other phenomena except just its own definition. So what's the definition of definition then, Francois?
the triply qualified substantial existent.
Well, as it is not, because you cannot posit the three qualities or qualifications of a triply qualified substantial existent.
Reason established.
Posit them, please.
In general, it's a definition. It's established by its illustration, and it's the definition of no other phenomena than its own definiendum.
That's right, yeah. Okay, so that's enough to be going on with. So we come to that first debate now, I think. Wherever it's gone. There it is. Yes, so we only really went through this pretty quickly, didn't we? So it'd be good to just go through it again, right? From the beginning. So yeah, so this is the one, page 43. So we all accept, somebody says triply qualified imputed existent, it follows us correct sign in the proof of sound as definiendum. Yeah, I mean, you so often you have the definiendum given as the predicate, and the definition of that definiendum becomes the sign. So then, you know, it is a pot because it's round-bellied, flat-based, table-boiled water, you know. It is fire because it is hot and burning. So that's such a common way of proving something using the definition. So that's exactly what somebody's doing here. So, but is it a correct sign? So the triply qualified existent, imputed existent is a correct sign in proof of sounds impermanent. So if we say yes to that, somebody raises the objection. Somebody else, another Kachik, another debater, doesn't say our own system. The subject, triply qualified, imputed existent, it follows that it is the property of the subject in the proof of sound as a definiendum because it is a correct sign in the proof of that. If you accept that, then the subject truly qualified imputed existent, it follows that it ascertained as only existent in accordance with the mode of statement on sound because of your acceptance. Yeah, so it has to be on the subject, right? It has to exist on the subject. But only existent in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. Accept that then. So the subject truly qualified imputed existent, it follows it exists on all sounds because of your acceptance. If you remember that word only, it only exists on sound and it's not non-existent on any sound, then, you know, you say it's only existent on sound. So that's part of the definition of that one, you know. Product has to exist, is only existent on sound. So in that, you know, following that pattern then, this is, you know, trying to make a, you know, keep that as our, you know, just substitute the different words, keep the same definition. So then you would have to accept that triply qualified imputed existent is only existent in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. So that follows the subject triply qualified imputed, it exists on all sounds because of your acceptance. If you accept that, then that subject, it is not reasonable to accept that it exists with all sounds. Before it said on all sounds, but now it's saying with all sounds, but I don't think that makes much of a difference. Or does it? I don't think that's really part of the debate to make a difference between those two things, but I say, we'll see how we get on. It's not reasonable to accept that it exists with all sounds, because if it is a sound, it is not necessarily that. If it is a sound, it's not necessarily a triply qualified imputed existent. Yeah, if it is a sound, it's not necessarily triply qualified imputed existent. Example, Maria? Marie. She gone? There she is, Maria.
Are you
Suominen.
asking me, Geshe-la?
Yes, Maria.
I'm sorry, I won't be able to give any example. I'm a bit lost now. I'm trying to understand what is being said.
Okay, yeah, fair enough, don't worry. So let's have somebody from Nalanda Monastery. Creme de la creme. Renata, you've been studying definition of definiendum and isolates. So can you give an example of a sound which is not a triply qualified imputed existent?
An object of hearing of an ear consciousness?
Yeah, object of hearing of ear consciousness. Object heard by ear consciousness. That, you know, that's the definition of sound, right? So that's a triply qualified substantial existent. So not all sounds are triply qualified imputed existence. Oh dear, oh dear. So what do we do now? Yeah. So it's not reasonable to accept that it, triply qualified imputed existent, exists with all sounds, because if it is a sound, it's not necessarily that. If it is a sound, it's not necessarily a triply qualified imputed existence, such as, you know, object of hearing by ear consciousness, object heard by ear consciousness. Okay then, but somebody might say no provision. You know, if it is a sound, it is not necessarily a triply qualified imputed existence, but still, triply qualified imputed existence is the property of the subject in the proof of that, in the proof of sound being a definiendum. So if you say no pervasion, we say there is a pervasion, or this debater says there is a pervasion because mirror making all things clear, a presentation of signs and reasonings. Page 14 says, although sleeps at night with its leaves curled exists with tree, It does not solely exist with that, because it does not exist with all of them. Because if it is a tree, it does not necessarily sleep at night with its leaves curled. So that's giving the reason why it sleeps at night with its leaves curled is not the property of the subject in the proof of a tree being sentient. Just because some trees sleep with its leaves curled, you can't say that tree, sleeps at night with its leaves curled just because if a few of them do. Whereas you can see that product, since it's on all sounds, then it's safe to say that product is the sound is a product, because whichever sound you pick would have to be a product. So that makes much more sense. But the thing with the triply qualified imputed existent, it doesn't exist on all sounds. So how can it be a correct sign in the proof of? How can it be the property of the subject? Then how can it be a correct sign in the proof of the sound as a definiendum? So that's the question. So if one states the syllogism, the subject, sound, it is a definiendum because it is a triply qualified imputed existent. So are we going to accept that triply qualified imputed existent in that proof is a correct sign? Jan, please.
I suppose you would have to say no, because it doesn't. It's not property of the subject. I think it doesn't exist on triply qualified imputed existent doesn't exist on all sounds. But it sounds like it should be a correct. I'm not sure, but I guess I would go with no.
Subject triply qualified imputed existent, it follows it is not a correct sign in the proof of sound being a definiendum because it is not the property of the subject. And it's not the first mode in the proof of sound as a definiendum then.
Except.
Mm-hmm. So you could go on from there, which is, in the debate that comes below, which we haven't read yet, but maybe we should just think about it. So the next debate or coming down would say, in response to your answer would be, so the question then arises, is there a correct sign in the proof of sound being a definiendum or not? So if triply qualified imputed existent isn't a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum, is there a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum? Is there such a thing? Yeah.
Well, there should be, because it is a definiendum.
It is a definiendum.
So proof of sound as a definiendum. Because it is.
See, Jake was worrying about this. He was bringing up examples where it didn't, like the sign didn't seem to exist on all the subject. So, it's something he was going on about. So if you look at the debate, it says mid page 44. It's not the next debate, the one below. So it's in this series, but it's not the one immediately below. It's the next one but that. So someone says, triply qualified imputed existence is not a sign and not a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum. So this is Jan. So to that somebody else says, it follows that a correct sign in the proof of sound as impermanent, a sound as a definiendum does not exist because triply qualified imputed existent is not a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum, and there is nothing else to be posited. What better sign could there be? Like so many times we say, oh, it's hot and burning. It's fire because it's hot and burning. It's a pot because it's round belly, flat base, table of water. We're always using that kind of proof, definiend, the definition. So if you say, well, there isn't a correct sign in proof of sound as a definiendum, then you have to say, is there an inferential phallic cognizer realizing sound as a definitely or not? And if you say, no, there isn't, then, well, first of all, say, well, if there is an inferential phallic cognizer realizing sound as a definitely, then independent upon what basis a correct sign is sound realized as a definitely. Because it's going to be an inferential phallic cognizer, you know, a conceptual phallic cognizer realizing sound as a definiendum. It's you know, it's got to be conceptual realization at this level. So there has to be an inference. So there has to be a correct sign. And if triply qualified imputed existence isn't that correct sign, what is? And if you say, well, there is no correct sign, it's impossible, then if there is not, it follows that if it's an established space, it is not necessarily the object of comprehension of inferential phallic cognition. You know, we should be a pervasion. If it is an established space, it is necessarily the object of comprehension of an inferential phallic cognizer. That's kind of, you know, a convention of our system. I don't know if you've come across that before, but it's pretty widely accepted. Because sound being a definiendum is an established space, so it's true, you know, that's a fact. It is an object of knowledge. Sound is a definiendum. But surely that means it should also be the object of comprehension of an inferential phallic cognizer. So there should be a correct sign proving that sound is a definiendum. So what are you going to posit?
Can you carry on?
So what did you say, Jake? Yes. Is that Anneli?
I was just going to ask something, but I'll ask it later.
That's all right. Ask. You can ask. Please ask.
Yeah, I was just wondering, that made it sound like inferential valid cognizers mainly realize definiendums. Don't they realize definitions as well?
Well, this is if it exists, there is an inferential valid cognizer realizing it. That's so whether it's a definition, definiendum, or neither of the two. Whatever it is, there should be an inferential valid cognizer realizing it.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. As long as it exists, it's realized by an inferential valid cognizer.
That's the claim, yeah.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be true in all cases, but surely we ought to be able to have an inference realizing that sound is a definiendum, because that's pretty, you know, that's not so sort of, you know, it's pretty, it just follows a simple structure. I was going to ask Jake, have you got any comment, Jake? Do you think
I mean, you can just say something.
This is
it's a property of it, a sign which proves sound is a definiendum. Sound is a definiendum because it is established by valid cognition as such.
Yeah, so triply qualified imputed existence isn't the correct sign in that proof.
No, I would say it is a correct sign, actually. I'd argue that it is. Because the definition we saw of having to be established on only on the subject was just the definition of the property of the subject in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product. So that's very specific. That doesn't, as you said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the case for the property of the subject in other signs or other syllogisms.
Yeah, so maybe there are other ways of proving that sound is a definiendum. Whether the one that Jake suggested, oh, the subject sound is a definiendum because it's realized by a valid cognizer as the definiendum. So brave attempt at a correct.
They say that kind of thing all the time. I mean, that's our system, actually, you know.
But if you realize with the valid, if you realize that sound is realized by a valid cognizer as a definiendum, haven't you already realized sound is a definiendum when you've realized the property of the subject? So you don't, you know, there's nothing to realize after that. So just by realizing the property of the subject, you realize the probandum. So that's
Yeah,
correct
that's
signs
true.
aren't like that, are they?
That's true. Can you have a doubt?
Should be-
Can you
that's all
realize
the
that
three-
sound is established by valid cognition as a definiendum and still wonder if it's a definiendum? No, you can't. No.
Yeah, you see, so if it's a correct sign, you realize it is the three modes. It is a property of the subject and counter pervasion and the forward pervasion and counter pervasion. And then there's this correct second party who's wondering, is it actually like, if it's a product's necessarily impermanent and the sound's a product, if it's not impermanent, it's definitely not a product. You realize all the three modes, and then you can focus on the sound. So, that means then that sound must be impermanent in the next moment. That's the direct effect of knowing the three modes. But if you realize, the probandum just by realizing the property of the subject, then would it be a correct sign? No. Anyway, that's a side issue. Let's concentrate on the main thing. So Jake is saying in his brilliant analysis that, so this requirement that whatever you're putting as a sign, it has to be ascertained as only existent in accordance with the mode of proof on the subject. Well, Jake's calling that into question. That's true of sound being impermanent because it's a product, but does it mean that's true of all of all signs, in all syllogisms, in all proofs? So he thinks that that's definitely okay for sound if it's a product or not, because is it impermanent because it's a product? That will do as a definition of the property of the subject. But when you come to something different, like sound being a definiendum, you don't have to take that as being the you don't have to model your definition of the property of the subject, definition of the property of the subject on that. You can make your own definition up, basically, Jake says.
That's actually kind of what you said before.
When
I asked this question originally, you said, this might be just for this particular syllogism. It might not be the case for others.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you said something like that.
Something like that. So if you said, by the person for whom it has become a property of the subject and the proof of sound as a definiendum, it is ascertained as only existence in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. Is that that's not the definition of being the property of the subject, the proof of sound as a definiendum?
No.
What would you say, Anila, to that? You agree with Jake? Microphone.
Well, I would say that it would be still the definition, but that the word solely has to be interpreted in another way.
Oh. That's an alternative. So, by the person for whom it has become a property of the subject, the proof of sound as a definiendum, it is ascertained as only existent in accordance with the mode of statement on sound is the definition of it being the property of the subject in the proof of sound as a definiendum. So you accept that?
Yes.
It follows that it is not because it follows then that it is not because it follows then that if we put the sign as being triply qualified imputed existent, it follows that triply qualified imputed existent, it only exists in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. It is ascertained as only existing in accordance with the mode of statement on sound. You accept?
So sorry, what am I supposed to accept? That it is that.
Subject, considering the subject triply qualified imputed existent,
Mhm.
it is a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum.
I accept.
So it follows it is the property of the subject in the proof of sound as a definiendum.
I accept.
So it follows that it is ascertained is only existent in accordance with the mode of proof on sound.
I accept.
So it follows it exists on all sounds because it is ascertained as only existent on sound.
No perversion.
There is a perversion because it's just like that with sleeps at night with its leaves curled. Sleeps at night with the leaves curled does not solely exist with tree because it does not exist with all of them. Because if it is a tree, it does not necessarily sleep at night with its leaves curled. So sleeps at night with its leaves curled does not exist with all trees.
Mm.
And therefore, you know, to cut a long story short, it's not a correct sign in the proof of the tree being sentient. Now you're saying triply qualified imputed existent. Yeah. Does it exist with all sounds?
No, it does not.
Yeah. So then it's like sleeps at night with its leaves curled. It only exists with some sounds and not others.
Yes, it's similar in that way, but it's
So
different.
therefore it follows that.
No, what makes the
follows
may I
that. It follows that the subject, the triply qualified imputed existent, it follows it does not only exist on sound, is not ascertained as only existed on sound, because sleeps at night with his leaves curled is not established as only existed on tree, and the reason is exactly similar.
It's not similar because there is the difference is that it is not comfortable to say that the tree itself sleep with the sound curled with the leaves, while it is comfortable to say that the sound itself is a definiendum. So yeah.
Just depends on whether it's comfortable. It's a correct sign because it's comfortable as a correct sign.
Yeah, because you don't really need to prove that all, you don't need to prove that all sounds are definiendum because the subject is sound, the subject is not all sounds.
So for sound to be a product, then it's not necessary for all sounds to be a product. If sound is a product, it's not necessarily for all sounds to be a product.
It is, because in this case it works, because
it's comfortable. We just discovered a new definition of correct sign. It is a correct sign in the proof sign of it. Because it's comfortable as a correct sign. Yes, it's comfortable. Does the subject triply qualified imputed existent? Does it exist on all sounds or not?
It does not.
So it does not only exist on sound. It's not only existent on sound.
It does, because the only existence has to be interpreted in another way.
It only exists on sound.
Except
it only exists on sound.
Only existent on sound.
And so product, it follows, it only exists on sound.
Product is, yes, I accept.
Only existent on sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So follows product is only existent on sound because it exists on all sound.
Yes, there is pervasion, yeah.
Imputed existent. If it only exists on sound, then it exists on all sound.
No, there is another reason why it exists.
Right, the reason's the same. So the subject triply qualified imputed existence only existed on sound because?
Because sound itself, sound rank log is triply qualified imputed existent, while tree rank log is not sleeping with leaf skirt, so it's disqualified from being correct sign.
So in the definition of the property of the subject of the properties of the correct sign in the proof of sound being a definiendum, you can leave that word only out then.
No.
Sound, it follows, so the triply qualified imputed existent, it is ascertained as existent on sound. And that's all you need to say. You don't have to say it's only existent on sound. You just say, if you just say it's existent on sound, that's okay.
No, it's not okay, because only existent on sound means in this case that sound itself is it. While you cannot say that sleeping with leaf skirt exists solely on tree, because tree itself is not sleeping with leaf skirt.
So only basically can mean anything that's comfortable to you.
Not anything, but in when we take as a subject just the thing itself and not all the instances, then it's enough to prove that the thing itself has the quality.
Yeah, exactly. Agree. Can I add something?
Wait a minute. Well, I want to know.
I would like to add something.
What Annelies should say what the meaning of only is. Yeah? In the proof of sound is impermanent by the sign triply qualified imputed existent. What meaning does only have? I'm saying it's superfluous. You're saying it means something. What does it mean? It is ascertained as only existent on sound. Triply qualified imputed existence. So what does it mean?
So you're asking me?
Yes.
Still, yeah. It means that sound, self-isolate of sound, is triply qualified imputed existent.
Well, this sound is only existent on, a triply qualified imputed existent is only existent on sound. So suddenly only has to mean we're only talking about sound itself, not its instances. There's this bit of a struggle.
It's the thought of the most kind of all of us, Lord of Scriptures and Reasoning, Champa Purbuchuk.
Oh, Bachok.
Yes.
From Sarah J, isn't he?
Yeah, shall I read it, what I want to quote?
I want to hear what Jay's got to say. Jay, please, thank you. Thank you for your contribution.
I mean, I think it's basically this on a similar line of what Tenzin's saying, because this is something we went through in Pramanavartika. Dharmakirti makes this point that the general entity of the subject is more important than the instances of it when citing a syllogism, because the general entity of the subject, so like, which I think is a bit like saying the self-isolate, maybe is what Tenzin's saying. But so if you're, for example, if you say the subject a zebra, the subject that's not going to work. But basically, the point is that if you can, when you're trying to prove the property of the subject, as long as that property of the subject is true of the general entity of that subject, then the syllogism works. It doesn't matter if some of the instances do not possess that property.
So then follows the sound, follows that the tree does sleep at night with his leaves cut. What were you going to say, Chris?
I wanted to add some example for Jake's points. Like, for instance, object of knowledge is permanent because it's a phenomenon which is not changing. How do you say the definition of a permanent? No momentary. Yeah, a phenomenon.
It's a common locus, it's a common base of phenomena and non-momentary.
Yeah. So it works for the self-isolate of object of knowledge, but not all object of knowledge.
Not all the instances. Yes.
Yeah.
So he's saying object of knowledge.
Okay.
It's permanent because it's a common locus of the phenomenon, non-momentary.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Perfect. Yeah.
It's established on object of knowledge itself, but it's not established in all the instances of object of knowledge.
Yeah, and it works because the general entity, the property of the subjects that sign is a property of the general entity of the subject, even if it's not a property of some of its instances.
Well, if it's Dharmakirti, I can't argue with him.
Well, actually, I'm just reading my slide with a summary of some of the points from Kelsang Wangmo, sort of based on Dharmakirti. So I think that is the case, though.
Yeah. So we see where the great tutor Yonzin Pervashok is coming from then. Yeah. Okay. But you've got to say what only means. Or you can say, like with Jake, that actually there's a different definition for a property of the subject for, you know, when you're setting triply qualified imputed existence of the sign. Or you can say, like, analyze the same definition, but you have to give a really funny interpretation of the word only there. Anyway, yes, so we're getting the idea. So just look at this last sign that's on the same, the last debate on the same subject. It's just slightly different debate, but it's still on sound definiendum triply qualified repeated existence. So this is at the bottom of page 43.
Sorry, Kashi Graham. Before
Yes.
we move on, I didn't quite follow. Is triply qualified imputed existence a correct sign or not in this case?
Yes, so it's definitely a correct sign.
It is, just on its own.
Well, sound, the subject sound, it follows the definition, definienda, because it's a triply qualified imputed existent. In that proof, is triply qualified imputed existent a correct proof, a correct sign?
That's fine. You mean it's correct?
Yes, and so the subject triply qualified imputed existent, is it the property of the subject in the proof of sound and sound as a definiendum? I would say yes, accept.
Okay, I didn't expect that, but good.
Yeah, well,
Graham.
I think only is the key word. I know that could cause difficulty, but I think you have to do a bit of interpretation. You know, so you can say like the sound of a trumpet, the sound of a drum or something like that. You know, all those sounds, you know, triply qualified imputed exists on them. Yeah. But yeah, the object heard by ear, object of hearing of an ear consciousness or something, object heard by ear consciousness, that's sound. But triply qualified imputed existence doesn't exist on them so easily, does it? So yeah, you have to you know, wiggle a bit in your answer when you are under pressure, sort of, you know, like interpret words in different ways when you need to. But yes, it's definitely a correct sign anyway in that proof. So this other debate, or somebody's wanted to ask a question, Jason?
Yeah, it's only a very quick thought on these definitions just whilst we're on them. Triply qualified imputed existent, triply qualified substantial existent. On the substantial existent one, in other schools, do they have that substantial existent part? Because for other schools, I guess, substantial existent part is called into question. So I'm just curious whilst we're passing these definitions, that's all.
So other schools meaning, you know, consequentialists or you know?
Yeah, that's
only
just
school.
saying. Yeah, do they still have consider subject definition? Its definition is triply qualified substantial existence as the definition.
I imagine they would accept that, triply qualified substantially existent. But yeah, it is a question like nothing substantially exists. Nothing is kind of substantially existent or substantially established. But something could still have the three properties of being substantially existent in the sense of being a definition, yeah. So just because it has the three qualities of being substantially existent doesn't mean it's substantially established in the sense of existing from its own side, not to them. Yeah. But there is somehow, yeah, there's some sense of, you know, you can realize the definition like hot and burning before you realize fire. You know, they always make that distinction. Hot and burning can be realized through the direct experience of the sense consciousness, but to realize that to start you know, knowing that hot and burning is fire, then you have to have the process of thought, which connects the word fire to hot and burning, you know, the definition. And then you can start experiencing fire, you know, then you can start sort of knowing it as fire. So fire isn't a word, but, you know, knowing hot and burning as fire means you got to know the word fire and what it connects with. But they say you can know hot and burning just through the direct experience, like a cow can know hot and burning. No idea about having a name like fire for it. Yeah, so I think the other schools would go along with those definition of definiendum and definition pretty well. All the same. So let's just look at this other one quickly. It's pretty short. So somebody says, moreover, someone says, it follows that the triply qualified imputed existent is not a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum, because it is not the three modes in the proof of that. Yeah, so it's got to be three modes in the proof of that if it's going to be a correct sign in the proof of that. And again, there's a problem with the property of the subject. That follows because it is not the property of the subject in the proof of that. And that follows because if it is ascertained by a valid cognizer on sound, the basis of debate, it is necessarily ascertained by a valid cognizer that sound is a definiendum. So that's one of the points we just made with Jake about the property of the subject. You've got to be able to realize the property of the subject on the subject without realizing the probandum. So you've got to be able to realize sound as a product without realizing it's impermanent. You know, because the product is a helping thing that helps you to realize it's impermanent. So you realize sound's a product, and then on the basis of that, you think, oh, well, then it must be impermanent. So that's the way the sign's going to work, probably the subject. But if by realizing sound as a product, you've already realized it's impermanent, then it's kind of not doing the work of the correct sign, you know. By realizing the property of the subject, you've already realized impermanence. So the property of the subject isn't a help for you to realize impermanence. It's just realizing impermanence itself. So the problem of the subject, there's no sign doing anything like signing the way to get you to understand the probandum. See what I mean? So you've got to have somebody who realizes the property of the subject, and they realize all the pervasions. So then, you know, with the basis of that as their, you know, that's their basis, then they can have an infant realizing sound is impermanent. But if just by realizing the property of the subject, you realize it sounds impermanent or something, then it's not a correct sign. It's just, you've really already realized what you're supposed to realize just in the first step. So this is the criticism here. So it follows that triply qualified imputed existent is not a correct sign in the proof of sound as a definiendum, because if you realize triply qualified imputed existent on sound, and you've realized sound as a definiendum. Why is that? That follows because if it is ascertained by a valid cognizer on sound, the basis of debate, that's a triply qualified imputed existence, right? If it is ascertained by a valid cognizer on sound, the basis of debate, it is necessarily ascertained by a valid cognizer that sound is a definiendum. That is because if triply qualified imputed existence is ascertained by a valid cognizer on sound, it has to be ascertained by a valid cognizer that sound is a triply qualified imputed existent. And if that is ascertained, it has to be ascertained by a valid cognizer that sound is the first among the three qualifications. It is a definiendum. Please debate. Do you remember the three qualifications of being a triply qualified imputed existent? Do you remember those, Chris? Jimper, sorry?
Generally speaking, it has to be renowned as being a definiendum.
Mm.
And it is established on its illustrations, and it is defined only by one definition and no other phenomenon like this.
So the first one is it's renowned as a definiendum, but in the Yongdzin Perbajok and you know, in what the system I'm used to in IBD, they just say in general it is a definiendum. So if you realize those three qualifications, you need to realize those three qualifications in order to realize sound as a triply qualified imputed existent. So the first of the qualifications is that, you know, is a definiendum. In general, it is a definiendum. So in realizing that it's a triply qualified imputed existence, you've already realized it's a definiendum. So then how can it act as the correct sign?
Geshe Graham.
Yes.
So if I say consider the subject pot, it is a functioning thing because it's an instance of functioning thing. That wouldn't be a good, well, not a good, it wouldn't be a correct sign.
Yeah, I guess if you realize it's an instance of functioning thing, you realize it's a functioning thing, haven't you?
So you can never give an instance of something as a correct sign then, never ever.
No, because what are the core requirements of being an instance of functioning thing? It is a functioning thing.
Yeah.
It is the same essence of functioning, and the many common locus of being it and not being a functioning, of being a functioning thing and not being it are established. Yeah, so that's another one where the three qualifications. So that wouldn't be a correct sign. I mean, it might be helpful for somebody to in a certain situation, but you wouldn't call it a correct sign.
Would it also be the case with things like with like form? I think the definition was suitable to be shown as form.
Yeah.
But that's you know that can be like disqualified as a correct sign.
But isn't
that's kind of you know, showing you that to realize form, really, you know, you're going to have to just keep showing people examples, you know, because it's sort of the thing that a child is going to realize through being shown rather than being disputed and argued with, you know. So yeah, that's that has a similar kind of fault in the end, but it's it shows something all the same. Yes, Jason.
Yeah, no, I was just in my head, I was picking up on that point Jan just made, that at some point these correct signs trace back to what is supposed to be the primary valid source of knowledge, which is direct perception. But when they get there, they all become incorrect signs. If you get what I mean. We're supposed to be able to trace back any correct sign really, eventually, to some kind of direct perception. But then when we get there, they're all becoming incorrect signs because it's like, consider the subject colour, it is a colour because it's suitable to be shown as a colour.
Don't worry, mate. If it's comfortable as a correct sign, it's a correct sign. We've learned something tonight. That's probably the thought of the Yongzi, great Yongzi Pervashov. Yeah. So yes, there's something to be said there, but you know, something being a definiendum, it's a bit of a convention to it. Yeah, we'll say this is the definiendum fire, and this is the the defining characteristics of hot and burning. You know, so you're choosing, you're like choosing a word, aren't you? You're choosing a kind of definiendum to go with that experience, to go with that meaning. You know, so it's a bit sort of bit of a thought process involved. But yeah, how does something get to be a definiendum? So in the first one, in general, it is a definiendum. But if you realize that, then you've already realized it is a definiendum. So that's used as a correct sign.
Geshe-la?
Yes.
So what if the predicate was triply qualified imputed existent? Sound is a triply qualified imputed existent. What could be the sign for that correct sign?
It's triply qualified imputed existent because it's in general it's a definiendum. It's established on its illustrations. What are we talking? Sound? Are we talking about?
But if you realize
that is what you hit, bang a drum or what?
The definiendum, how could you have not realized that it's a triply qualified imputed existent?
Well, because you don't know what the three qualities are, but when you've realized the three qualities, first of all, you realize it's round bellied, then you realize it's flat base, then you realize it's able to hold water. So then you put them all together and say, so when the point of realizing the correct sign is to say, so it is round bellied, flat base, able to hold water then. You have to realize all three individually, and then you can say, so it is all three together, you see.
So it's not correct to say sound is a triply qualified imputed existence because it's a definiendum. It doesn't work. You have to go on the three characteristics of a definiendum, but you cannot serve the definiendum as the sign in the proof of sound is the triply qualified imputed existent.
Oh no, it doesn't work out. You can't say the subject fire, the subject whatever's blazing away in front of you. It is hot and burning because it's fire. That's the wrong way around. Yeah, you realize it's burning before you realize fire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the definition is the defining characteristics will make it what it is. So you've got to realize the defining characteristics. So then it can go in that category then.
Thank you.
But yes, so this point is it a correct sign or not? So who's going to ask? Jakob. So the subject, if you say the subject sound, it is a definiendum because it's triply qualified imputed existent. So in that proof, is triply qualified imputed existent as a correct sign or not?
I accept.
It is a correct sign. So it follows the property of the subject. Follows is not property of the subject because there's somebody who, having realized that sign, having ascertained that sign as only existent in accordance with the mode of proof on that subject, there's nobody who still wonders whether sound is a definiendum or not.
Okay, I accept.
You've been debating about this with a few of you.
No, this one. No.
You didn't get around to that one. Okay, yeah, well, never mind. So we'll leave that one to think about then.
Yeah.
So we better get on with the correct effect sign. We do a bit from the book now. We'll have another 10 minutes. So we'll just do the correct effect signs from the book. This is page 17. As we promised before, I'll just point out on page 16, in the second paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, it says exertion. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down in the paragraph, it says sound of a conch arisen from exertion. So that should be effort. It's just missed that out when I was editing the book. Two words mean the same thing, but in Tibetan it's the same word. In all these examples about arisen from exertion, arisen from effort, that should also be arisen from effort. So that's just a little mistake. Sound of a conch has arisen from effort. I think that's how we've been translating it. So don't need a different word there. I just want the same word. Okay. So then we've done the three modes for the correct sign. So then that's all in the section of definitions of correct sign. Not the definition of correct sign itself, but the definition of the parts of the correct sign. So anyway, so that's in the section of when correct sign is examined. First of all, you look at definitions, then you look at divisions, and of course the divisions will also have their definition. So we're on the stage of divisions now. But there's more than one way of dividing correct sign. So there's all these different ways of dividing correct sign. So we'll get the correct effect sign as part of the first way of dividing correct sign. So with respect to the third, I'm at the bottom of page 16. With respect to the third, which is explanation of the divisions of correct signs, there are 6. Division by way of entity, division by way of the predicate of the probandum, division by way of the mode of proof, division by way of the probandum, division by way of relating to the similar class, and division by way of the disputant. Yeah, so that's quite creative. We've got 6 different ways of dividing correct sign. And the first and the best known of those is division by way of entity. So entity doesn't have much. Division by way of nature or something. What we're going to say. Just examine what the possibilities are. So taking the first division then, division by way of entity. With respect to the first, there are 3 correct effect signs, correct non-observation signs, correct nature signs, and correct non-observation signs. Yeah, so you've got 3 correct effect signs, correct nature signs, correct non-observation signs. So I hope you've heard of those. Maybe you haven't, but those, you know, those are sort of general kind of types of signs which come up in, you know, in a sort of more kind of more extensive Lamrim text even maybe, you know, so have a bit more kind of familiarity. They're not just restricted to the very kind of sort of specially philosophical texts. But anyway, correct effect signs, correct nature signs, correct non-observation signs. So that with respect to the first of these, there are two, definitions and divisions. So correct effect signs. So that which is the effect, the three effect modes is the definition of correct effect sign. Okay, so it's not so useful as a definition though. So how are you going to say it is the three effect modes? It is the three modes in the proof of that, and then it's the three effect modes. Well, not necessarily kind of how you could, it's a shorthand way of saying it, but you know, to get a bit more, you know, understand what their special requirements of being a correct effect sign are, if applied to a base, then on the one hand, there is a common base of being held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of the existence of fire on the smoky pass by the sign smoke, and being the cause of smoke. And it is also the three modes in the proof of the existence of fire on the smoky pass by the sign smoke. Is the definition of correct effect sign in the proof of the existence of fire on the smoky pass by the sign smoke. So some of these definitions sometimes have to be a bit long, you know, to be careful to include what needs to be included and exclude what needs to be excluded. But don't be put off, you know, once you sort of just work with the words a bit and you kind of, you know, analyze it a bit, or you get a taste of what it means to be a correct effect sign. So it's got to be the three modes in the proof of the existence of fire on the smoky pass. That last part is, you know, just what we've talked about. The sign's got to be established on the subject and that in accordance with the mode of statement and so on. And then, you know, there's got to be the forward pervasion and the reverse pervasion. If smoke exists, you know, then fire exists and so forth. If fire doesn't exist, then smoke won't exist. You know, that's that kind of, you know, necessarily pervasion, two types. So just to build on that, the basis then, what is the special feature of the correct effect sign? Well, there has to be a common base of being held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of the existence of fire on the smoky pass by the sign smoke. So when we say on the smoky pass, the subject of the smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists, or there is fire because there is smoke, then, you know, you've got something which is held as the explicit predicate of the probandum and is the cause of smoke. So is there something that's explicitly expressed in the probandum, in the predicate, sorry. The predicate's the middle bit, right, you know, on the subject, the smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. So fire exists as the predicate, right? That's the predicate. That's what you are claiming, you know, or that's what the reasoning is asserting, you know, is or proving is existing on the subject. So the fire is the thing that you're trying to prove exists on the subject. So you're saying that fire, you know, fire existing is, you know, is a predicate of the smoky pass. It's something which is true of the smoky pass. Okay, so is there a common locus of that and the sign? A common locus of that and the cause of the sign. Yeah. So that's a requirement. There's got to be something which is in there, explicitly expressed in the predicate somewhere. And that's the main kind of thing that's in the predicate. And it's the cause of whatever is put as a sign. So is there something which is in the predicate there and a cause of sign? Well, yes. We've got fire. Okay, so that's just a simple case. If you put it more simply, like it's a case of your reasoning from the effect to the cause, because the effect is there, then cause must be. If the effect exists, then the cause must exist. That's all we're saying. And in practical terms, we've seen that so many times. We see, you know, smoke rising through the trees, blue smoke coming out above the trees, you know, oh, there's a fire in the forest, you know, or we see smoke coming out of the chimney of the house. And so we say somebody's lit the fire, you know, maybe in a country where they burn a lot of wood, like in the Pyrenees where I was living, you know, you see that see smoke coming out the chimney, or there's somebody at home. Then that means somebody's probably in the house, because you know they've got the fire on. So the smoke coming out of the chimney is a very good indication there's a fire burning in the stove. Yeah, so you're reasoning from the effect to the cause. So then the cause is going to be the predicate, and the effect is going to be the sign, right? So you've got to have something who's a common locus of being the predicate and cause of the sign. So that's what it's saying. And you've got your correct effect sign, if that's true. So with respect to the second divisions, there are 5. So that's some basic one, but these they've spun out quite a few divisions here, quite a few different types. So there's number 1, correct effect sign which proves a cause direct, correct effect sign which proves a preceding cause, correct effect sign which proves a particular cause, correct effect sign which proves a self-isolate of a cause, and correct effect sign which is a means of inferring a causal attribute. So some of those are pretty similar, really, but some of them have their own sort of special, tweaks, special quirks. So maybe we've just got time to read through the examples. The first one, proving a direct cause. The first, at the time of stating the subject on the smoky path, fire exists because smoke exists, smoke for instance. The second, at the time of stating the subject smoke in the sky, it is preceded by its cause, earlier fire, because it is smoke for instance. That's pretty similar, but slight difference. Third one, at the time of stating the subject, the sense, direct, perceiver, apprehending form, a condition of it exists, which is other than its dominant condition and its immediately preceding condition, because it is not produced merely by its dominant condition and its immediately preceding condition being complete, and it is occasionally produced. That, for instance. So you've got 2 causes, but those on their own don't produce it. So there must be another cause that you haven't identified. So that one, you know. So that's we know the three conditions which produce say an eye consciousness. So you've got the dominant condition, immediately preceding condition, and the one that's missing is what? That's dominant. What's the one that's missing? Tundu? Observed object condition, yeah. So what's the dominant condition in this context here? Tundu?
The sense power.
Yeah, so its eye consciousness would be eye sense power. That's a dominant condition. This eye faculty, you know, the visible eye faculty, which in the subtle form within it. What's the immediately preceding condition, Tundu?
Immediately preceding consciousness.
Yeah, so the consciousness that leads up this sort of stream of clearer knowing, which then at this point, you know, will arise as an eye consciousness after the conditions have come together. So that's a stream of your immediately preceding consciousness. And then the last one, the observed condition, observed object condition.
Eye consciousness would be form or color.
Yeah, so if we talk about eye consciousness, that'd be color or shape or something. Yeah, so form, visual form. Yeah, so just by having the immediately preceding moment of consciousness and the perfectly working eye faculty, that doesn't mean you're going to have an apprehension of form. So you need a third thing, which is this observed object. Anyway, we'll talk about this later. The fourth one, at the time of stating the subject, the appropriated aggregates, they have their own causes because they're occasionally produced. That, for instance. So there you're just proving something, you know, has a cause, basically. So yeah, that still can be a realization in certain cases, though. The fifth one is more complicated. At the time of stating the subject on the lump of jaggery in the mouth, there exists the ability of the earlier taste of jaggery to produce the present form of jaggery, because the present taste of jaggery exists. That, for instance. So what's jaggery then? Have you been to India, Maria? Did you eat jaggery?
I did. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, it's a kind of sugar, isn't it? Yeah. It's like from the sugar cane, the sugar from the sugar cane, isn't it? I think. Brown,
Yeah.
very sweet thing.
So if I have a cube of white sugar, is that jaggery?
No.
So what's special about jaggery?
I think it's like, isn't it like raw sugar from the sugar cane somehow? I'm not sure what it is, but it's like, as far as I understand, it's like the sugar from the sugar cane, and it's brown, and it's like, it has a different taste. It doesn't taste the same.
Yeah, it's brown and sticky, like in lumps.
Yeah.
The stuff, yeah. Yeah, so it's a sort of a crude form of sugar, isn't it? It's not been refined to be white, and it's just it's not been particularly crystallized. It's just in lumpy sort of basic form. Yeah. I mean, in Purbichok's, some translation they translate it as molasses, but it's a long way from being molasses. It's nothing like the American molasses, which is black and very strong flavor. It's just sort of crude sugar of a different kind. Yeah, so that's all. Just a type of Indian sugar, which if you know, just a very sort of simple form, not refined in a factory. Okay, so I'm going to stop there then. And thanks very much for attending, coming in, giving your contributions.